You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I'm here with Brett Newcomb.
I am so glad to be here today because finally we're going to talk about this topic.
I want to do it tomorrow.
No, we have to do it today. I won't be here tomorrow.
What topic are we going to talk about?
Procrastination.
I'm off mic. I keep on moving. Why do I keep doing that?
Because you're trying to avoid something.
I'm trying to avoid
Accountability.
I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about procrastination and something that, while we were researching this, I had sent you a couple of articles, and what...
So can I tell people that
normally
when we prepare for these things, Mike comes up with some topics or people suggest them to Mike, and then he does a little bit of research, and he sends that to me as a package that I review before I come over here, and then we talk about whatever. And he sent them to me this morning.
I sent them last night. I sent them last night at 9 o'clock. If you check the tag on your email,
okay.
and what did it say?
Last night at 9 o'clock.
And what did it say? And what did it say?
I think one of these links is broken.
No, well, yes. One of the links in the packet was broken, which I resent.
Yes, I know.
But the original email said, "I am very sorry that this is so late."
And I said, I'm used to that. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
You didn't say that. But
I did to myself.
But you are used to it. Because why? Why are you used to it?
You are one of the best procrastinators I've ever met.
And your experience with that is?
When I had you in class for the very first time 25 or 7 years ago,
I
had to give you an incomplete because you hadn't turned in your seminal paper that was required for the finishing the class. And I think it was 2 years before I got that.
Good times.
Yeah. I don't know what you were doing those 2 years, but it wasn't research.
What I was doing was goofing off and going back to the university and having the person who ran that program at the time take my transcript to the actual board of trustees to have part of it expunged so that I could be eligible to graduate.
Yeah, because they had a 1 year limit on incompletes, and you had to resolve them. But somehow we managed to get around that.
Well, what ended up happening was that the university at that point was really, really invested in their matriculation ratios. And so...
You want to say that in English?
They wanted people to graduate.
Okay. Yeah.
And so...
Success was our goal.
The guy that was running the program came to me and said, "Hey, look, I would really like for you to graduate. And would you be willing to do this work if I could make you eligible?" And I was like, I really don't want to, but sure, whatever. And so he did his magic, and then I did the work. And I did every single bit of the work that was required of me.
And he came to me and he said, "If this guy does his paper, will you grade it?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Of course."
Yeah. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah. So, which brings us to the underlying discussion that we wanted to have. What's going on when somebody procrastinates like that? And one of the arguments is a fear of failure.
Right.
If I try this and I'm not successful, I will fail, and then I have to own my failure. People will know I have a big F on my forehead. Another argument is fear of success. What if I jump over this hurdle, land on the other side, then what do I do? And I think those are both underlying motivators for the concept of procrastination. Why do people procrastinate? And the cultural arguments are also often because you're lazy. You just don't want to do anything. You just rather sit around and not accomplish this task or reach this goal or whatever the thing is. But there's a term that we learned years ago studying to be therapists was called a flight into sickness. That one of the conditions that you need to be aware of is that people make progress in therapy until they reach a point of being ready to go. We're finished and you can go away. And they have developed a dependency on you as the therapist, and they want to stay connected to you. And so just before, when they sense that you're starting to maneuver and say, well, I think we're about finished here, they will have a relapse of some kind into negative or dysfunctional behavior that will then require them to stay in therapy. And so it's a little dance, and it's called a flight into sickness. and or a flight into failure. Because if I set myself the goal of being the only person in my family to ever graduate from college, and I'm within, one or two activities of being able to graduate, and then that's beyond me. I'm out of college. Now what do I do? I may sabotage my success. I may get kicked out of college. I may fail out of college. I may lose, the dog ate my homework. Not my fault. It just happened, and therefore I wasn't able to finish college.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the articles that I had sent you made this argument that laziness is the psychological construct that is blamed for procrastination in our society. And I have clients who come to me all the time and say, I'm really lazy, or my parents say I'm really lazy, or the parents say my child is really lazy.
Do you have a bullshit alarm that goes off?
Yeah, I say
beep, beep, beep or something?
I say all the time, there isn't a lazy person in the world.
Yeah.
You know why? Lazy people are dead. I mean,
it's all about survival.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to do
whatever you have to do
what they have to do to survive. Yeah. And if you do what you have to do to survive, you're not lazy.
Yeah.
And then what we come to is, whose rubric are we using? Whose yardstick are we measuring with? Now, you may believe that your child is not living up to your expectations. That may be true, but that doesn't mean that they're lazy.
My parents told me on a regular basis that, and actually a couple of my teachers did as well in high school, you're not smart enough to go to college. You need to find another career path. You need to go find this job or this job or this job that you might have the competency to do. That was a real challenge to not internalize those messages.
I was expelled from my high school, and my principal, he was a spitter. He was a close-talking spitter, so he'd get right in your face, and spittle would come out of his mouth, and he was wagging his hand and his finger in front of me, telling me I'd never hold a full-time job, I'd never go to college.
Right.
Yeah. And then he expelled me.
So maybe we need to be that way with our children more. Tell them that they're going to be failures. They don't have any competency. That they're just awful.
Well, I can tell you from experience that those repeated messages make it more difficult for you to succeed. At least it made it more difficult.
For me, they made me more stubborn.
You say that, and I have no reason to doubt it. Yeah. Right. And you say that gave you an incentive.
Absolutely.
And for some people that may be true. For me, it made it harder for me to feel comfortable being able to embrace the reality of my own potential.
Yeah, I've seen that with clients, but I've seen both sides of that. I've seen clients that were so angry about those messages that they were determined to overcome them. And then I've seen other clients that embraced those messages and they were determined to manage to fail to prove the message.
Well, it goes back to the Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue.
Yeah.
At the end of the song, his dad tells him, you ought to be thankful for the spit in your eye and the
grit in your craw.
Because I'm the SOB that named you Sue.
Right.
And so for some people that does give them grit and determination, and then the parent can at the end of their lives take responsibility for that. Well, I'm the reason that you are the person you are today. But I think that's hollow. I think that those people achieve in spite of their parents, not because of their parents. But I also think the opposite is true. So I don't think we should espouse that as a parenting technique.
No.
Right. And I know you weren't, but I'm just saying that, for everybody out in the audience, we're not saying that is a good thing. Some people use that as motivation, but a lot of other people suffer from it. I was one person who suffered from it. It made it harder for me. I grew up thinking, oh, you know what? I think I'm smart enough to actually do some things. But the messages I got were, you don't know who you are. You're a no good SOB. You don't have the right to believe in yourself, and it made it harder for me to be able to succeed. And I've always said that procrastination is a fear of success, not a fear of failure. And the reason that I believe that is true is because if you are procrastinating, you are by definition failing. You are not hitting the targets that would make you successful. So I believe it's easier perceptually, psychologically, for people to fail. I believe it's like climbing a ladder. And if you climb to the top of a ladder and you fall off, you're going to get really hurt. If you fall off the first rung, you're fine. I believe that psychologically people feel more comfortable falling off the lower rungs of the ladder, but they believe that they're going to fall off.
So do they learn to avoid ladders?
Exactly. Yeah. They learn to, avoid,
or at least
anything.
ladders that were handed them by other people.
Yeah.
So we had a previous.
Right, exactly. So because if it's important to them, like playing video games, they may be very adept.
Right.
And they may climb way up high on the ladder.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked in a previous podcast about how our society sets standards and goals and tries to imbue us with them so that we internalize those and markers by which we measure our success. And one of those is how much money do you have or do you make? One is what job do you have? How do you acquire status that our culture values?
Right.
And that we try to propagandize our children from birth to buy this set of standards and measure themselves against it. And so we spend a lot of time in therapy dealing with people who cannot fit the silhouette that something was drawn for them, or who don't want to fit the silhouette. What if I'm different? What if I don't want to be a physician? My parents want me to be a doctor, but I'm phobic in response to blood, so I can't be a surgeon. So now what? Am I a failure? Is my life over? Have I no value? What do I do? A good example would be Chris Christopherson, who was a major in the Army, who was a Ranger helicopter pilot, who went to West Point, who taught English literature at West Point, and his father was a general, and he was moving along the progression, and his family supported that goal in his life, and that's how they were going to measure his success. When he became a general, he was successful. He quit it all and went to Nashville to write and sing and perform music, and his mother wrote him off. She said, "You don't bother coming for Christmas.
Right.
You're not part of the family anymore."
Right. So this is tangential, but he's still alive.
He's still alive.
Yeah. And I didn't know that. I mean,
that he was still alive.
Yeah. I mean, I know Chris Christopherson, and
he's coming to St. Louis.
I just recently,
in February, I think,
watched a movie. My wife loves Christmas movies. And watches them all year long.
Yeah.
And
I know people like that.
Yeah. And she loves them, and that's totally fine with me. But I'm not going to watch them in July. But when it gets to be the Christmas season, then
is that a seasonal affective disorder?
Yes, absolutely. That's the definition of it. But we just watched a movie that he made with Harry Connick Jr. and Willie Nelson, and there were all kinds of drop-in cameos for all kinds of country stars. And I'm blanking on the name of it, and I wish that I could.
That's not helpful.
But if you look up Chris Christopherson and
Movies,
Harry Connick Jr. holiday movie, Willie Nelson, you're going to find it. And it had really, really bad reviews, but I just watched it because of the names that were in it.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it, but I was surprised that he was still kicking it.
So were you procrastinating while you were watching that movie? Were you supposed to be doing something else?
No, actually, so for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, but I'm actually really good now today of meeting deadlines. Like, I don't miss deadlines. I am spot on. I may procrastinate up until 15 minutes before the deadline, but I never miss a deadline. And that's what I tell people is you can't be a procrastinator if you hit your important deadlines.
So when I used to study and teach sociology, there was something that we studied called the Peter Principle. And the Peter Principle was an argument that said work will expand or contract to fit the amount of time in which you have to do it.
I believe in that.
So if I give you a term paper
right.
at the beginning of a term and say this is due at the end of the term, you'll put the same amount of time in it, the same amount of literally clocked minutes in doing it, whether you start day one and get it done and do 10 minutes a day, or whether you start the night before it's due and do it for 12 straight hours and get it done. I've seen evidence of that throughout my teaching career. If you structure an assignment for people, they will use the amount of time you give them to get it done. And some of them will try to push that envelope and use more time than they were given. But very few of them will come in the next week and hand it in.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, they don't even realize it's an option. And some would ask me, like, well, what if I get it done this week? I said, fine, turn it in.
Turn it in.
But they would not, systemically, they wouldn't get it finished until...
But would you agree with that statement that if you hit your major deadlines, that you can't be a procrastinator?
Well, if you hit your major deadlines, you're not procrastinating around those deadlines, but you may be procrastinating somewhere else, because I think your original premise, are we doing it to avoid things or to approach failing at things, like, what channel are you on? What are you talking about?
Right.
You know, my deadline or goal is to lose weight for my daughter's wedding so I fit in the dress, or to get slim enough that I can go on the beach and not embarrass myself. But I'm 3 months out. So I say, well, my goal is to lose a pound a week. I probably won't really start trying to do that until I'm about 2 weeks out, and then I just won't eat for 2 weeks and hope I drop enough. I mean, it's the way people do that all the time,
right?
For those kind of things, or pay off my student loans. You know, I'm going to send $5 a week to my student loan, but then I find another use for that $5, and I procrastinate paying the student loan.
But as long as and one of the things that I am very aware of as I get older, I would like to believe more mature and wise, is the
wouldn't we all?
Extent of my own countertransference in what I do. And so I'm very aware that a lot of my own life experiences informs the way in which I do therapy and the way in which I perceive it. And so for this particular issue of procrastination, because I do have some history with that, you know, I want to make sure that my countertransference doesn't, that may have been true for my experience, but may not be true universally or even majority. So what I tell my clients is, if you actually hit your deadlines, if you do it the night before, that's perfectly fine. That can't be procrastination, and don't buy into anybody who tells you that it is, because I still hear people who say, well, my parents tell me that if I'm up all night the night before, you know, something's due, that I'm procrastinating, and that upsets them. And I say, you do you. Don't worry about what your parents say.
So one of the questions I always ask my clients, how's that working for you? Does that work? Are you succeeding? Are you passing? Is it acceptable? And if it's not working for you, let's look at it then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely true. Right. So, but what shouldn't happen is that an external message, so the parents saying you're bad because you're doing this, should not inform their opinion of themselves.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So if you hit your major deadlines and that works for you, I remember when I wrote my dissertation. So I was originally going to do my dissertation on addiction as an attachment disorder. So a lot of the research on that was, you know, from 20, 30 years ago, because it was very heavily psychodynamic.
Right.
And so my dissertation...
The whole attachment theory is psychodynamic, so it should be.
Yeah. Well, and so my dissertation committee loved the idea, and they were all over it. And so as I started working through it, I got about a third of the way done, and they said, oh no, this research is way too old. Right. Start over.
Yeah.
What? So I had to start from scratch. And I did the biological differences and similarities between depression and anxiety, because I knew that I could get absolutely current research. Yeah. And
this research was written tomorrow.
Yeah. And I actually like that topic, so it wasn't horrible. But because now I was already, you know, I had already burned a third of my time, I ended up writing, and it was like 120 pages long. I ended up writing that thing, literally, I'm not even joking, the 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline. But I got it done.
Yeah.
And I graduated.
Right.
On time. For the first time in my life.
I have to say I'm impressed.
Yeah. So, you know, that's my experience, that if you hit those deadlines, that you're not procrastinating. It doesn't matter how you do it. Now, I'll tell you, man, that was a lot of late nights, and there were times when I would get up and say, why am I doing this to myself? Yeah. But when I got it done, I felt so great that was an epiphanal moment for me. I was like, you know what? If you hit your deadlines, that isn't procrastination. But am I just kidding myself? Would you agree with that? Or am I just kidding me, and that isn't a good message to give to the masses? That worked for me, but isn't a good thing to say to the general population.
I think I agree with the concept. If you hit the deadlines, if you hit the mark that you set for yourself, then however you got there,
right.
The question becomes, are you satisfied with that?
Exactly.
Are you happy with that? And rather than giving yourself a pejorative label of some kind and saying, oh, I'm just not as good as I hoped I'd be honest with yourself. Are you okay with that? Is it,
right.
You know, I got it done, so I finished it, and I obtained the goal, which was the degree or the credential, passed the licensure test. So then what? I mean, who gets to say otherwise? I mean, I used to ask medical students who were clients, And I said, when you graduate, they were upset about something. I've got this class and I'm struggling in it. I said, when you graduate from medical school, what are they going to call you?
Yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah. No matter where you end up in the class.
And your patients are not going to come in and say, can I see your grade in intestinal fortitude?
Right.
So if you reach the goal and you pass the licensure and you're a doctor, then the goal is to become a good doctor. Help people. So don't waste time and energy on these sort of pejorative self-definitions that lead to failure activities of one kind or the other.
But I think that a societal message would be, hey, if you write your dissertation 2 weeks before the due date, then you didn't do good work. And I don't believe that. I think some people, that's how they operate, and they do their best work when they're under that deadline.
Proof is in the pudding.
That's right. And what you said is the most important thing for me, which is it working for you?
Yeah.
If it's working for you, it's not a problem. Don't allow other people to inform your opinion of yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully this was a conversation that people enjoyed. I know that for me it was extremely therapeutic and I enjoyed it a great deal. So hopefully you guys liked it. If you have any questions or comments, again, always get us through the website, psychwithmike.com. The music that is in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue, and I thank him for that. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.